next speaker here, Catherine Havasi, comes out of the Media Lab, I guess in a similar background. Her field is artificial intelligence, and I'm very, very excited to have her here. Where is she? There she is. To tell you about some of the most interesting breakthroughs where you can use text analytics to really transform a lot of different industries. And with Luminoso, they've been achieving quite a bit of success. And Catherine, I'll let you explain.
All right. Hello, everybody. And thank you. And I guess it's still kind of good morning, although it's sort of about bordering on good afternoon. So we're Luminoso. We take unstructured text data and help companies and people make sense of it in order to better drive outcomes and improve KPIs. And I won't go that way. And we've been working with customer service and market research for quite a long time. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is sort of some of the best practices and lessons we've taken along from there about the sort of invisible challenges about taking data and insights and adding it into businesses. So the distance between customers and businesses is constantly shrinking. Both your individual resellers, end users, maintenance technicians, et cetera, are constantly delivering feedback on products, on services, and on that information. And not only do they expect a response, they expect their opinions to become part of the strategy of your business. And they expect that to happen very quickly. And the reason being for that is that it turns out that companies with high customer loyalty, high employee loyalty, all that kind of stuff, that's really directly tied to revenue, to ROI, to churn, to all the metrics. And it's becoming increasingly tied as customers get more and more flexibility in being able to choose who they work with. And that's something that's been shown by all the Forresters and Gartners of the world, that as an industry becomes an industry where customers have more choice, how problems are dealt with in that industry becomes an enormous driver of the way revenue works. And so with that came an enormous interest in adding data analytics to that equation. And so the field got very interested in sentiment analysis and in big data, and there was this enormous fury of work on those two types of solutions that really didn't necessarily impact the way a lot of people did everyday customer service on a deep level. Sentiment analysis can be very shallow, and it doesn't really get into or correlate very well to KPIs. And often big data ran into problems because your big data is in Lotus Notes 4, and how you're going to get into your insight system is a big question, and it's all different kinds of data. But the other side of that is that most companies don't actually have huge quantities of customer feedback data for any particular SKU or product that they have. So that's kind of where we come in. So we are Luminoso. We help companies deal with all sizes of unstructured text. I know there are some data people here. We're a word embedding system. I'll get into that very briefly, but if you want a technical conversation, I'd love to do that later. We process any kind of unstructured data in multiple different languages and help tie that to KPIs and figure out, well, what's really driving your NPS score, your revenue, whatever you're interested in, what correlates with what and what correlates with better outcomes for your customers. We tend to do it. We actually are the best in both industry and academia for natural language processing right now. We're on the top of the leaderboard for most of the metrics and most of the benchmark tests, beating out people down the street, both academia and industry, for that privilege. And we use it to power two products. So one of which is called Analytics, which is a batch data system. You take in all your surveys, you take in all your customer feedback, that little feedback form on your website, bring all of that information in and help disseminate out information that comes from that insight. And we do that with most of the US-based consumer electronics companies, or a good deal of them, retail and software, especially out here in the Valley. And the reverse of that is Compass, which is a streaming system which takes in streams of text data. So if you have something like social media, or you have a news stream, and is able to process that. So a lot of people know of our company not from customer service, even though that's how you probably, or market research, which is probably how you've actually interacted with us or used a product designed by us, but from the World Cup. So in 2014, we had the, opportunity to be able to run the text analytics for the World Cup. So we went out on the web, found all of the data that was being talked about across all the social networks and really all the news, about the World Cup, brought it in, processed it in real time, and sent it out to individual people through that app that you may or may not have used called One Stadium, and help people figure that out. And so right after this happened, the first thing that happened is many of our customers and prospects and other companies called us and said, we want to take what you're doing for the World Cup and we want to hook it up to our contact center and take in all that customer feedback and be able to react to it in real time. And this is a very exciting thing because obviously faster analytics matters. In a contact center environment or other sorts of customer service, there's huge ROI implications to how fast you react to something going wrong, both with regards to churn and regards to other sorts of things. It's a risk management issue. Do you know that something's going wrong with your product or your store or your chain before the press does? Are people getting sick in this area? All that kind of stuff, all the way down to being able to do marketing and being able to react in real time to which one of your commercials land during the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. So there's an enormous implication to being able to do analytics fast. And everyone's like, we want to use streaming analytics in the call center. But the reality of the situation is that almost no companies right now are being able to react to situations that come up in a real-time or streaming environment. Gartner says that by about 2017, 70% of the most highest performing revenue companies will be using real-time analytics to react to what's going on. But right now, almost nobody is. And I can tell you that working with companies as well. And there are two big reasons for that. To really work with faster analytics, you need two things, and only one of them is technical. And in the sort of inverse of the grass is always greener, I find the non-technical problem the harder one, given that we're cracking the technical problem. The technical problem is that analytics needs to be completely hands-off. So if you're a telecom company and Sprint comes up with the Framley plan, you need the analytics to immediately know what a Framley is and learn that automatically without a person in the loop and be able to adapt. And that's what we do. That's what we specialize in automating all of that stuff and making it all work in an automated fashion. But the second bit is actually a little bit harder, and I don't have a good solution for it, which is building business processes for reacting to that. So in December, we started taking in contact center data from a new customer that's one of the big box stores out there. And within the first 2 weeks, they came up with, I think, 4 different insights that would affect their ROI. And they were very excited about that. And then they immediately found out that implementing the changes that they would need to catch those 4 different ROI systems was actually really difficult. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about best practices about how to deal with that kind of situation and how to talk and deal a little bit more with being able to handle those insights that you get. So the number one thing that I would suggest doing is sort of be very gradual about it, right? If you're doing an HR survey every year and you're reacting to employee comments every year, it's not going to be possible for you to immediately jump over to real-time reacting to employee comments. It's too big of a jump. Even though we can do it technically, from a business process perspective, it's too big of a jump. So what we suggest is that you sort of rework your process so that you're able to think about and work with data in a much more frequent way. So for example, within the contact center, we're hearing more and more that people are interested in taking in customer data, calculating how they can change their material or their website to get fewer people to call. This is awesome. This really has a huge potential for ROI impact in a company to keep people off the phone. But if you start getting a stream of, please edit the website here, please edit the website here, please edit the website here in real time, you're not going to be able to react to that if you don't have the infrastructure for it. So maybe it's something where we want to, in these particular cases, be able to give that kind of feedback on something more of a monthly or even weekly basis to be able to make those changes dynamically. On the flip side of that, I'm going to make one quick point, which is the difference between streaming analytics and real-time or batch analytics, or semi-real-time analytics. And this is a bit of a technical point for a 10-minute talk, but when everyone called and said, we want to use the World Cup system on our data, whether or not you want to or not, and I sell both types of systems, so I have no horse in this race, streaming analytics is usually not what you want. You need streaming analytics when your worldview can change instantly. And an example of that is something like, to use a World Cup example, because it's actually my personal favorite, when Luis Suarez bit Chinini, within a second, every joke about biting on Twitter was about this incident, regardless of whether or not it mentioned Suarez, Chinini, or soccer. And if we were going out and collecting, which we do this, every tweet about the World Cup, we needed a system that would adapt its worldview immediately to say, biting is about soccer, and then drop it 5 minutes later. Things happen during debates. You know, people make jokes, things like that. You need to be able to react very quickly, and that's where you need a real-time or streaming system. In most customer feedback environments, you don't actually need that. So, you know, we work with people like Bloomberg who actually do, their worldview will change in a second. You know, an international event happens, something happens, boom, you need to know that. But often you need to understand that, you know, what you're actually looking for is a real-time system running on top of batch analytics. Your worldview doesn't change very often. You know, how often does the family plan come out? Probably not that often. So working with another company in the Valley that's trying to address urgency in customer support tickets. You know, if somebody comes in and contacts this company and they're like, there could be a very urgent problem. I'm rapidly anonymizing this case study. There could be a very urgent problem, and you know, you need to elevate that problem, or it could just be a run-of-the-mill problem that you have and you want it bucketed and dealt with in the normal ways. And the thing is, originally, they had come in and said, well, we want a streaming system. We get an enormous amount of customer feedback. But the reality is what constitutes an emergency in this particular area is not something that changes very often, and that's usually true. So in the end, they're using, you know, they're setting up a batch system that will recalculate every so often. So that's a little bit of sort of my ideas of, you know, how we can actually take and harness the power of all the customer feedback we're getting into while not being able to, you know, while not necessarily having the business processes set up for it yet. So I'll tell you a little bit about Luminoso at the end here as well. So we were founded in 2010. We came from the Media Lab. And, you know, I don't think I've completely left MIT, but I'm kind of one of those people who has mostly left MIT. I run the Digital Intuition group, and I know I see some familiar faces here from Media Lab events at the Media Lab for a while, where we basically helped computers understand the world more like a person, less like a machine. We started doing this work. This work actually comes from the Media Lab in the late 90s, so it took a long time for this to come to fruition, as much of AI does, but I think we really have gotten somewhere with their approach. And yeah, we work with a lot of companies in consumer electronics and retail to help them deal with customer service. And I will be around later either to give demos, I guess, if I get the Wi-Fi up, or to be able to talk to you more about your analytics problems, regardless of what they are. I'd love to chat with you about them. All right, thank you.